Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom were great friends of meetings with acquaintances. Therefore, their absence from a long-planned celebration caused astonishment. A close friend was celebrating his birthday in Knoxville, Tennessee. The couple not only did not come, but also stopped responding to calls and messages. At that time, no one could suspect that this would become the beginning of one of the most disturbing stories of the state. Shannon was born in the year 1985 in the small town of Nacogdoches, Texas, where slightly more than 30,000 people lived. She had two older brothers, Jason and Chase. The parents treated their children particularly carefully as the path to parenthood was not easy for them. The mother had difficulties with pregnancies and the doctors doubted the possibility of having children. When Shannon grew up, the family decided to move to the larger Knoxville, Tennessee, where more prospects opened up. She grew up in an atmosphere of love and care and was a successful student. The young woman was particularly close to her mother, Dina. People often turned to Dina for advice and valued her ability to listen and offer unbiased solutions to problems. Shannon had also inherited this quality. After school, she decided to study sociology. Unlike peers who strived for independence, Shannon felt comfortable with her parents because of the warm relationships. This allowed her to study in peace and share new insights with her mother. They often spoke about the future and discussed dreams of a wedding and the 4 children that Shannon wanted so much. Although Shannon lived with her parents, she strived for independence and dreamed of building her own life. To become financially independent, the young woman combined her studies with 2 jobs. She had started the position shortly before the fateful events. Through hard work, Shannon could afford a silver Toyota 4Runner SUV. This purchase was a special achievement for her. Her chosen one, Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr., was born in Knoxville. His parents had longed for him very much and loved him. From a young age, he stood out for his boundless energy and was enthusiastic about baseball. Additionally, he showed interest in craftsmanship. He learned woodworking and made various objects for his relatives. In his youth, Christopher was interested in motorcycles and thought about becoming a mechanic. Later, he returned to woodwork and decided to learn this craft professionally. He continued to do sports, played baseball, golf and tennis, loved fishing. In doing so, Chris remained a friendly and sociable young man who maintained warm relationships with family and friends. Their meeting took place in the year 2006, when mutual acquaintances asked Shannon's mother for advice. This chance encounter developed into a steady relationship. The young people spent all their free time together. Family and friends were convinced of a bright future for the couple and expected a wedding soon. No one could suspect what fate awaited these young people. On the evening of the 6th of January 2007, Chris and Shannon planned a dinner together, after which they wanted to go to the birthday celebration of a mutual friend. During the day, Shannon drove to a girlfriend to prepare for the date, while the others were busy organizing the celebration. After packing her things in a bag, she made her way to the apartment in Washington Ridge and left her car in the parking lot. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, Shannon waited in the parking lot for her boyfriend to drive together to dinner. Chris was late because he was driving a friend, which upset the young woman somewhat. When they met, there was a small argument, but after a hug, everything was fine again. However, they never reached their destination. The couple simply disappeared. Early in the morning of the 7th of January, Shannon's mother woke up with an uneasy feeling. When she looked into her daughter's room, she realized that she had not come home. There were no clues about her whereabouts. Dina tried several times to call Shannon, but all calls went to voicemail. The woman noticed some missed calls from unknown numbers that had come in the previous evening. When she called back one of the numbers, she heard the voice of a friend of her daughter, which only increased her concern. The young man told her that he was trying to contact Dina to ask about Shannon. It turned out that neither she nor her boyfriend Chris had appeared at the celebration. This was unusual for such a reliable couple, to miss an event they had promised to come to. No one could reach them by phone. The acquaintances of the young people became concerned. Therefore, Shannon's girlfriends returned around 23 o'clock to the place where they had said goodbye to her a few hours earlier. In the parking lot, they saw Chris's pickup, but Shannon's car and the two themselves were nowhere to be found nearby. Later, Dina's supervisor called. He informed her that Shannon had not appeared at work, and he had worriedly tried to find out the reason. At this moment, Dina's concern turned into real panic. She decided to contact Chris's family, but they too could not receive any news from their son and were very worried. The parents decided to act together and turned to the police. However, they were told at the station that a missing person report would only be taken after 24 hours. The law enforcement officers did not take the situation seriously and suspected that the young people were simply celebrating with friends. The parents tried to explain that such behavior was completely atypical for their children. The families had to begin the search independently. They first examined the parking lot but could not find any clues there. At the same time, relatives and acquaintances called all city services to find any information about the missing persons. But these attempts remained unsuccessful. No one had seen the disappeared. On the 7th of January afternoon, a disturbing report came from a railway employee. He discovered something unusual next to the tracks on a stone embankment. The law enforcement officers who arrived made a sad discovery. Due to the effect of fire, it was practically impossible to determine anything concrete, although it was presumably the remains of a young person. The relatives of the missing persons learned of this incident, but without special examination, identification was impossible. The families did not give up hope and continued the search. They checked the location data from Shannon's mobile phone and found that the last signal was captured in the area of Cherry Street, near the telephone mast. The scene was located in a problematic part of the city where the couple had no reason to drive. It was not on the way to friends, and getting there by chance was difficult. One had to drive about 10 kilometers. This led to the assumption either the young people had driven there because of something forbidden, or they were brought there against their will. On Monday morning, the 8th of January, the relatives were already searching for the missing couple in this area. When questioning the residents, they discovered Shannon's car in one of the alleys. When examining the vehicle, it became clear. Someone had intentionally removed everything that could have led to identifying the owner. All personal belongings of the young woman had disappeared. The chargers for phone and headphones were missing. The driver's seat was pushed so far back that the petite Shannon could not have driven the car at all. Between the seats was found a pack of cigarettes, although neither Shannon nor Chris smoked. On the floor by the pedals, dirt could be seen. Unthinkable for Shannon because the car was her first important purchase, and she always kept it spotlessly clean. Everything indicated that strangers, untidy people had been in the car and something bad had happened to the young couple. Possibly they were being held somewhere, although no ransom demands had been received. The parents immediately informed the authorities. At this point, a day had passed since their disappearance, and the police had already begun investigations. They took the car and all found evidence for examination. The experts presented their first conclusions about the discovery near the railway tracks. The specialists were shaken by the condition of the victim. Signs of inappropriate treatment were also found. The victim had no shoes, and the traces on the feet indicated a long journey. The discovery was covered with a blanket, and the outer clothing was used in an unusual way. After the examinations, the experts confirmed it was the missing Christopher Newsom. The fire damage significantly hampered the investigators' work and destroyed most possible evidence. The law enforcement representatives advised Chris's family against personal identification. They only showed them a sealed black bag that they did not want to open in their presence for ethical reasons. Shannon's relatives still hoped for a good outcome, but expressed their dissatisfaction with the police's slowness at the beginning of the investigation. This delay possibly influenced the fate of the second missing person who had not yet been found. After receiving the information, the officers intensified the search for Shannon. Although Shannon's relatives had already examined the car, which could complicate the search for traces, the officers managed to find an important detail: an envelope with the address Shipman Street, 2316. Apparently, the perpetrators had accidentally left it behind. The house was 10 kilometers from the location of the last meeting with the missing persons and 2 blocks from the alley where the car was found. Fingerprints were discovered on the envelope. The check in the database revealed that they belonged to Lamar Coos Davidson, who had recently been released after 5 years in prison for aggravated auto theft. He immediately became the main suspect in the case of the incident with Chris and Shannon's disappearance. The police arrived at the suspect's house on the night of the 9th of January. He rented an old apartment in an industrial area where there were only a few residential buildings. No one answered the knocking, but the law enforcement officers had reason to believe that the missing persons might be inside, so they broke into the building. During the search of the house, the officers found belongings of the missing persons: Shannon's headphones, Chris's shoes, and his baseball cap. This confirmed that they were on the right track. In the kitchen, there was a large garbage bin with a dirty sheet under which was a voluminous bag. In it, the investigators discovered something that prompted them to immediately deliver the sad news to Shannon's parents. The specialists determined that in contrast to the traces of Chris's presence, which they tried to hide with fire, the perpetrator in Shannon's case had no time to cover the tracks. The experts were shaken by what they saw. Shannon wore only an undershirt. Various injuries were found. The forensic technicians found biological traces of the perpetrator, his DNA, and fingerprints. Some matched the traces on the garbage bin and the bags from the car. Their owner was Lamarcus Davidson. Cartridges from the weapon used to shoot Chris were also found in the house. The suspect himself was not on site. The house was empty. The suspect, recognizing the inevitability of his arrest, fled. He was immediately put on the wanted list, and the police began an intensive search. However, the investigators did not yet know that several people were involved in the incident. During the investigation of Lamarcus's phone, the police discovered frequent calls to a certain Eric Boyd. He was quickly found, and patrol officers stopped his car. To the direct question about Davidson's whereabouts, Eric initially evaded, but revealed his accomplice under pressure. He emphasized his unwillingness to be held responsible for others' actions and told that the main suspect was hiding in a building they had emptied on the day of the young couple's disappearance. Eric led the officers to an empty house for sale that was located near the suspect's apartment. Inside, they found scattered garbage bags, food remains, clothing, a phone, a weapon, and binoculars. Amid this chaos was Lamarcus Davidson himself. He was arrested and taken to the station. Notably, he was wearing shoes that belonged to Chris. During interrogation, the perpetrator tried to present himself as innocent and told several contradictory versions of events. According to one of them, Chris and Shannon came to him by themselves, but then his acquaintances appeared. Davidson claimed he did not interfere due to numerical superiority. Instead, he allegedly took Shannon's car to run errands in the neighboring district until the situation calmed down. After the drive, he left the vehicle in an alley. According to his words, he did not interfere after his return, although Shannon asked for help. Lamarcus denied his involvement in the incident with Shannon's friend and insisted on having no contact with the young woman, although later investigations showed otherwise. 2 other people were also involved in the case: George Thomas, the suspect's best friend, and Letalvis Cobbins, his stepbrother. They were arrested on the 11th of January as accomplices, but the list of participants was longer. Eric Boyd was also involved in the case and revealed Lamarcus's location. Later, the involvement of their acquaintance, Vanessa Coleman, was also uncovered. All arrested shared information about the events of that night, trying to minimize their own role and shift blame to others. It turned out that Lamarcus was the organizer. That evening, he urgently needed a vehicle to transport certain cargo. By chance, he met with his partner Shannon, who was with her boyfriend in the parking lot. Instead of a simple car theft, they decided to eliminate all witnesses. Under threat of violence, they brought the couple to the leader's house. Letalvis denied any contact with the victims, but DNA analysis proved otherwise. The same was also repeatedly committed by the group's leader. Vanessa claimed to have been in the position of a prisoner herself. According to her words, she acted against her will, out of fear for her safety. After long investigations and questioning of all participants, the authorities reconstructed the complete picture of the incident. Everything began with Shannon and Chris being held in the car immediately after their capture. They were thrown onto the back seats and then brought to the group leader's house. The investigation revealed that the perpetrators held the couple against their will. Chris was taken to the railway tracks the next morning, where the inevitable happened. The perpetrators tried to cover the traces of their actions. Shannon remained in captivity for 2 more days. During this time, she was treated extremely inappropriately. The perpetrators used various methods to cover their traces, including the use of household chemicals. The experts could not determine the exact duration of the incident with Shannon, but documented the extremely severe nature of the inflicted injuries. Even experienced investigators and criminalists were shaken by what they saw and noted that this went beyond the scope of usual offenses of this type. The perpetrators left Shannon in a garbage container and fled. After that, Lamaricus handed over some of Shannon's belongings to his acquaintance Vanessa, who was also involved in the incident. All these items were later found during the search of her apartment. The investigators rejected the version that the arrested Vanessa Coleman was an involuntary participant. She had the opportunity to contact law enforcement immediately after leaving the leader's house, but did not do so. During the search of her house, a personal diary was found in which she described what happened as an exciting summer adventure. The writing style and emotional tone indicated her voluntary participation in the events. Lamaricus Davidson and George Thomas were charged with 16 counts, including particularly serious legal violations, deprivation of liberty and robbery, with additional aggravating circumstances. Vanessa was charged on 12 counts, including aiding crimes, robbery, and kidnapping. Eric Boyd was accused on 20 charges in connection with aggravated crimes. The 5th participant, Letterless Wiskobans, was also charged with 20 similar counts. The court trial dragged on for almost 2 years. During this time, the case was reopened several times. The group's leader presented an incredible version of events to the court and claimed the couple had come to him voluntarily. According to his words, the situation got out of control after his accomplices appeared. However, this story found no favor in court. Despite the defense's efforts, the lawyers failed to exonerate the defendants. The jury found them guilty on most charges. The relatives of the victims insisted on the maximum possible sentence due to the exceptional severity of the incident. Lamaricus Davidson received the maximum sentence and an additional 80 years imprisonment. Eric Boyd, George Thomas, and Letterless Wiskobans were sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. In the year 2010, the most serious charge against Vanessa was dropped, but she received 53 years for the remaining offenses. An unexpected turn occurred when all the convicted tried to appeal their sentences. In January 2011, Judge Baumgartner resigned after admitting his dependence on prohibited substances. This called all his decisions into question. The state Supreme Court upheld the sentences against Davidson and Cobbins due to existing DNA evidence. The remaining cases were remanded for retrial. As a result, Vanessa's sentence was reduced to 35 years. George Thomas received the opportunity to apply for early release after 51 years due to his cooperation with the investigations. The later appeals by Vanessa and Thomas were rejected. In the year 2019, Eric Boyd stood trial again, where he pleaded guilty to 36 new charges. The majority of these incidents were confirmed by the testimony of his accomplice, George Thomas. The court sentenced Eric to twice life imprisonment without possibility of early release, with an additional 90 years imprisonment. Vanessa received the opportunity in the year 2014 to file an application for conditional release after 7 years imprisonment, but the commission rejected her request. She received the last rejection in the year 2020, when it was decided that the next review of her case will not take place before 2030. In the year 2008, the building in which these tragic events with Shannon and Chris had taken place was demolished. At this location, there is now a memorial in their honor. On an autumn evening in the year 1993, Polly Klaas held a pajama party at her home in the tranquil town of Petaluma, California. She had invited 2 close girlfriends, and they spent a joyful time exchanging secrets and playing their favorite games. Nothing indicated any danger on this cozy evening. However, the peace was disturbed when Polly's mother suddenly awoke from disturbing noises coming from her daughter's room. When she hurried to see what was happening, she had to discover with horror that a stranger had forcibly taken her daughter away. Polly's friends, frozen with fear, could only observe what was happening from the side. In the sunny city of Fairfax, California, Polly Hannah Klaas was born on the 3rd of January, 1981. Her childhood was somewhat unusual. Her parents, Mark and Eve, decided to live separately when Polly was still very young. After that, she and her younger sister Annie moved with their mother to the city of Petaluma, also in California. Despite the parents' separated living situations, the atmosphere in the family remained warm and friendly. Mark soon found a new life partner with whom Polly developed a wonderful relationship. She visited her father regularly, maintained contact with both parents, and there were no conflicts between them. Polly herself grew up to be a quiet and modest person. Although she had only a few close friends, she truly blossomed on the stage of the school theater. Acting became her true passion. She participated enthusiastically in school performances and public musicals, where she felt like a fish in water. Polly especially loved pajama parties. It became her favorite entertainment, sometimes inviting girlfriends to her place, sometimes staying overnight at theirs. These meetings developed into a pleasant tradition in her small group. When Polly therefore asked her mother on the 1st of October 1993 to be allowed to invite Gillian and Kate for a sleepover, Eve naturally agreed. The evening began as usual. They gathered in Polly's house, had dinner, and chatted cheerfully. Around 10 o'clock, Eve, exhausted by severe headaches, took 2 sleeping pills and went to rest after asking the others to wake her if anything was needed. The effect of the medication put Eve into a deep sleep, from which she was awakened around 11 o'clock by worried voices. They reported an intruder who had taken Polly away. Eve immediately called emergency services and hurried to check on her younger daughter Annie. Fortunately, she was sleeping peacefully in her room, unaware of what had happened. The arriving law enforcement officers first spoke with Polly's friends. The story they told filled everyone with serious concern. The evening began completely normally. The friends gathered in Polly's room enthusiastically discussed the upcoming Halloween and chose costumes for the celebration. Around 11 o'clock in the evening, they decided to prepare for the night. Polly offered to get the air mattress previously prepared with her mother to set up a shared night camp. The moment when Polly opened her room door changed the entire course of the evening. At the threshold stood a strange man with a cold object in his hand. Since Halloween was approaching, they initially thought it was a holiday prank. The stranger's face was not even covered by a mask. However, their laughter did not evoke a festive reaction from the man. The stranger forced all 3 to return to the room. He restricted their movements and began asking who lived here. When he learned that it was Polly's house, he took pillowcases and put them over Gillian and Kate. Then he made a strange demand to count to 1,000 and promised to take Polly away only briefly and bring her back soon. The friends tried for about 30 minutes to free themselves from their situation. When they finally succeeded, they immediately rushed to Ava, Polly's mother, to report the incident. They were able to give the investigators a detailed description of the stranger's appearance. Since the man's face was not covered, Gillian and Kate could remember him well. This enabled the specialists to create a detailed composite sketch of the wanted person. The investigation of Polly's house provided the investigators with several clues. Numerous shoe prints were discovered on the floor, but they all belonged to family members, to Polly herself, her mother, sister, and close friends who had visited her in recent days. Strange fibers on the carpet attracted particular attention. The experts determined that these fibers did not match the material of the house carpet at all. The analysis showed their similarity to car upholstery. The investigators checked the vehicles of all the family's acquaintances, but found no matches. This led them to suspect that the fibers could have entered the house through the shoes of a foreign person. On one of the surfaces, the specialists discovered a clear handprint. However, the technology of that time was not so advanced. The methods of dactyloscopy were just developing, and DNA examinations could not yet be discussed. Nevertheless, the print was carefully preserved for possible later comparison. Among the evidence was also an unusual piece of fabric that resembled silk. The edges looked smooth, as if they had been carefully cut with scissors. The pattern on the fabric was so unique that the investigators considered this find particularly valuable for further investigation. A single hair was also found in the room, whose ownership could not be determined due to the limited possibilities of laboratory analysis at that time. The search for Polly reached an unprecedented scale. Thousands of committed citizens joined the operation. 4,000 volunteers combed through the surroundings of the house, abandoned properties, and nearby private grounds. The police officers tried to find drivers who resembled the created composite sketch, but these efforts remained unsuccessful. Time worked against the investigators. The first 24 hours after Polly's disappearance were crucial. For this reason, the case was immediately transferred to federal agents who immediately began the search. The days passed and the situation became increasingly tense. During the questioning of residents, new details came to light. Several neighbors remembered a suspicious passerby who had attracted their attention that evening through his unusual behavior. Initially, no one had attached particular importance to the strange unknown person. The residents of the neighborhood could not imagine that they should have reported him to emergency services. Later, when the investigators showed them a composite sketch that had been created according to the descriptions of Polly's friends, the neighbors unanimously confirmed that was exactly this man. The investigations also extended to the school that Polly attended. The investigators conducted careful conversations with every teacher and employee of the educational institution. They were interested in any possible connection to the suspicious person and all clues to Polly's whereabouts. But all employees could prove their whereabouts at the time of the incident, and no one resembled the person in the composite sketch. The investigators even conducted an analysis of the fibers found in Polly's house and compared them with the materials from the vehicles of all school personnel. However, this check also brought no results. With each day, concern grew, not only in the family, but also among the authorities and the entire local community. The city residents were worried that the mysterious unknown person could pose a danger to other children. This put additional pressure on the investigations. A reward of $200,000 was offered for reliable information about Polly's whereabouts. The famous actress Winona Ryder personally provided this sum and organized a press conference with an appeal to bring Polly back. The search for Polly became groundbreaking for its time. The early 90s were a special time. The internet was still in its infancy, and neither law enforcement agencies nor federal authorities used it as an instrument for search operations. 3 committed citizens from California took the initiative. They were the first who dared to use the possibilities of digital space. They uploaded a photo of Polly and a composite sketch of the wanted person created by experts, as well as information about a reward for useful tips, to the internet. Despite the absence of the social platforms familiar to us today, there were other possibilities for online communication. Thanks to these, about 25 million Americans saw Polly's picture. The experts of the Federal Bureau of Investigation hoped that such broad reach would be the key to the solution. The reality looked different, however. Although Polly's story attracted more and more attention, internet users could not provide meaningful information. This led, however, to an unexpected effect: the emergence of numerous voluntary helpers. Special call centers were established that received hundreds of calls every day. Relatives of other missing persons approached Polly's family. They wanted not only to help with the search, but also hoped to adopt this innovative experience for searching for their relatives. Weeks passed, but the investigations into Polly's disappearance made no progress. The investigators found themselves in a difficult situation. No essential evidence could be found. There were neither traces nor clues that could have led to the person who was connected with her disappearance. Even modern forensic methods brought no results. None of the samples was suitable for analysis. An unexpected turn occurred when Mark, Polly's father, received a call. He heard a voice that was remarkably similar to his daughter's. The caller, Polly, reported that she was in a hotel and explained that she had used a moment when she was alone to contact her father. She introduced herself as Polly and ended the conversation abruptly. Mark immediately informed the law enforcement agencies. At this time, the FBI specialists did not yet have modern equipment for tracking already terminated calls. They could only wait and hope that there would be another contact that could be traced back. Their wait was not long. After a few hours came the second call. The same voice tried again to communicate with Mark. This time, the technicians succeeded in determining the source of the call. However, the result confused everyone. The signal did not come from a hotel, as the caller had claimed, but from an ordinary residential area. When the officers arrived at the given address, the situation quickly cleared up. The calls came from a local student who was the same age as Polly. This explained the similarity of the voices. It turned out that everything was part of an inappropriate prank that was provoked by friends. Given the young age and remorse, it was decided to leave it at a serious conversation. The parents were pointed out the need to observe their daughter's behavior more attentively, and the student herself was warned about the inadmissibility of such actions. At the end of November 1993, about 8 weeks after Polly had broken off contact, an important call came to the law enforcement agencies from the owner of a large property. On her several-hectare property, the woman noticed 3 unusual objects. The investigators who arrived at the scene found, together with FBI specialists, significant evidence. A piece of silk fabric that matched exactly with the material from Polly's room. Dance tights. Eva confirmed their disappearance that night. And a piece of adhesive tape. This information prompted the investigators to examine the area more closely. Interesting details came to light. The property owner had contacted the police on the very day of Polly's disappearance with a most peculiar report. Her estate frequently attracted uninvited guests. The extensive wooded property with a single small house in the middle was not completely fenced. Despite posted private property signs, the absence of a fence led to people often accidentally ending up there without being aware of the trespassing. Among the many uninvited visitors, one case particularly impressed itself upon the owner. On the same night that Polly disappeared, an unknown person penetrated the property with a car. His car got stuck in the softened ground. The first to notice the strange guest was the nanny who was looking after the owner's child. She admitted that she did not dare to address the stranger. His presence caused her great concern. The property owner also kept her distance. According to her words, something about the stranger's appearance made her listen, especially his penetrating gaze. Both women decided to ask the police for help. When the law enforcement arrived at the location, they found a man there and inquired about the reason for his stay. He explained that he had accidentally driven onto private property and would be ready to leave immediately, but asked for help. His vehicle was stuck in the mud. The officers noticed the strange behavior of the unknown person. He was visibly nervous, sweated heavily, and his condition raised suspicion of consumption of prohibited substances. However, a test on site was not possible, and there were no grounds for arrest, as the man behaved peacefully. After the officers had helped to free the car, the unknown person, who turned out to be Richard Allen Davis, left the property. He was born in 1954 in San Francisco. His early years can hardly be called happy. The parents did not care for the child. At 12 years old, the family broke apart, and the mother distanced herself completely from her son and handed him over to his father. Richard's father showed extreme irresponsibility. He was often not at home, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Richard remained alone, sometimes under the supervision of neighbors, or tried to find relatives. Problems with the law began already in his youth. He committed small offenses, participated in street conflicts, which brought him to a reform school for several months. At 17 years old, he committed a serious violation of the law. After the incident, the judge offered him a choice: reform school or military service. Richard chose military service in the USA, but did not last 2 years. He was dismissed for inappropriate behavior. Richard's adult life was characterized by frequent conflicts with the law. At about 20 years old, he was sentenced to 15 years for a serious crime. However, he spent only 1 year in custody and was released early for good behavior. During this time, disturbing rumors circulated around Richard. His acquaintances suspected him of involvement in the disappearance of 19-year-old Marlene, although it was officially determined that she had left voluntarily. Marlene's relatives connected her disappearance with a party at which Richard was present. However, these suspicions remained only assumptions without evidence. During Polly's disappearance, Richard was under supervision after his release. His whereabouts were unknown. He had no fixed address. The investigators sent an internal notification only to the officers and called for increased vigilance. It was decided not to pass the information to the press, out of concern that Richard might leave California or the country. The turning point in the case occurred on the 13th of November, 1993. A patrol officer stopped a vehicle on the street that was being driven by a drunk driver. After a check with a special device that indicated an exceeding of the limit value, the law enforcement officer carefully studied the man's documents. At this moment, it became clear to him. Before him stood exactly the man who was being sought in connection with the disappearance of Polly Klaas. Acting carefully, the officer only told the arrested person that he had violated his parole conditions by driving under the influence of alcohol. Richard did not object and went to the station. Only at the station, after reading his rights, was he told the true reason for his arrest: the Polly Klaas case. A long conversation with the investigators followed, during which Richard admitted his involvement in the incident. The investigators assumed that the confession occurred due to the irrefutable evidence. His handprint matched exactly with the one found in Polly's house. The fibers from his car carpet were identical to those at the crime scene. Polly's friends, who were asked for identification, pointed confidently at Richard. In his car, a silk fabric fragment was found, exactly like the one in Polly's room and on the witness's property. Under the pressure of evidence, Richard began to tell. On that day, he had consumed prohibited substances with friends. When he felt unwell, he decided to break into a house to enrich himself. He chose the neighborhood randomly. He noticed an open window and broke in. According to his words, he had planned nothing in advance, knew neither Polly nor her family, and had not observed them. After he had searched the house and found no special valuables, he wanted to leave. At this moment, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. When he noticed Polly's fright, he made an impulsive decision. He put Polly in the car and drove away. Later, he stopped at a secluded place. It turned out that Polly was in the car when the residents noticed him on the private property. Even when the police officers helped to pull his car out of the mud, there was the possibility to change everything. After they had helped him get free, he drove to the highway. Richard showed the investigators a specific place to which the search group should be sent. On the 4th of December 1993, 2 months and 3 days after her disappearance, a search team found Polly Klaas near the highway, at a location designated by Richard. The medical experts conducted a thorough examination, but could only determine limited information. Their conclusions confirmed Richard's statements about the events of that day. The specialists determined that everything happened approximately on the day of Polly's disappearance. Based on the collected evidence, Richard was held accountable for wrongful actions against Polly Klaas. When he received the opportunity to speak in court, alongside words of regret to the family, he surprisingly raised serious accusations against Polly's father. According to Richard, Polly supposedly said to him, "Don't do to me what Papa does to me." These words triggered a violent reaction from Polly's father. He tried to lunge at Richard but was held back by those present. The defendant's statement disturbed everyone in the courtroom, not because of lack of remorse, but because no one believed his words about Polly's father. The accusations remained unproven, with Eva standing firmly by her former husband. On the 18th of June 1996, the court announced the verdict. Richard was to receive the highest punishment provided by law. In August, he was sentenced to death. He attempted to appeal the verdict, but unsuccessfully. In the year 2006, he was found unconscious in his cell after taking a large amount of medication. The doctors were able to save him, after which he returned to the detention facility. In the year 2009, Richard's defender filed an application with the Supreme Court, but it was rejected. The court confirmed the verdict without changes. The lawyer announced that he would continue to file appeals. Due to the constant appeal proceedings, Richard still remains in a special wing for particularly dangerous criminals. It is expected that the verdict will be executed after the completion of all appeal proceedings.